Welcome back to the Whiskey Tornado. I'm your host, Lance. Today we review a bourbon blended whiskey from MGP. We review 8 and Sand. Hey guys and gals, welcome back to the Whiskey Tornado. I have a unique one for you guys today. This is 8 and Sand out of MGP. It is a blended bourbon whiskey. It's 44% alcohol, 88 proof. The interesting thing about this is it's 4 blended whiskeys. I think if I'm not mistaken, there's corn whiskey, a light whiskey, also MGP's bourbon recipe, and some rye as well. So this is one that's not super fancy, as you can see on the bottle. And if you didn't know about it, you'd probably walk by it, or you may have walked by it a million times. But this is one I wanted to review because if you're walking by it, I think you guys should grab it. Let's get a pour of this and we'll get into it. All right, we got a nice pour, guys. Before I get into the nosing and tasting of this, I want to go over my new rating system for whiskeys. I rate whiskeys on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being trash bourbon, 2 being below average, 3 being bar worthy, 4 being I would buy 2 bottles if you can, and then a 5 being, so good, throw cost out the window, just make sure you have a bottle on your bar. I have 6 categories that we rate 0 to 1, 0.5 being average, and that's nose, the palate, finish, presentation, value, and availability. I think all of those things combined make a great bourbon. So this is, like I said, this is from MGP. They're bottling their own juice in this, but it is a blended bourbon whiskey. So it has corn whiskey, it has light whiskey, has their bourbon in it. And 8 and Sand, I guess they're paying homage to the railroads and the railroad museums. And I think like the term 8 and Sand used to mean smooth sailing, which is pretty indicative of this spirit, if you ask me. I know a lot of people hate to use the word smooth, but I've really liked this bottle since I bought it, you can see. And I find one of the best uses for this bottle is a warm-up whiskey for the night. And we'll go into why, but let's get into the nosing here. We've got, on the nose, cinnamon, like dried oak. So like if you found a piece of wood out in the field or whatever and smelled it, I kind of get that to it. There's that dry, dusty corn, and some type of light fruit, but I can't put my finger on it. But very, very reminiscent of bourbon. All right, let's get into the taste here. So the taste, you get dried oak. That was my first taste. So the first thing that hit me was that dried oak I was smelling. Definitely is cinnamon and those baking spices. Candy corn maybe? Let me take another sip here. Yeah, maybe like candy corn. And a really weird note that I'm getting, almost like, gosh, this is gonna sound funny. If it's like the aftertaste of lipstick. So it's like almost like cherry, but not quite cherry. It's different than any bourbon I've tasted. I don't know that I've ever got that note, like the aftertaste of lipstick. Like if you kiss somebody, it's gonna sound so funny. Never given that note in my life. But yeah, so the nose, I would rate the nose, I forgot to give a score on the nose. I would rate the nose just a little below average. It's not bad, it's pretty close to average, but I probably rated a 0.4. The palate, while it's not super viscous, it doesn't taste really thin for its proof, thanks to, I think, that rye spice. There's some complexity going on there. It's not super complex, but there's enough complexity going on there. And the oak isn't overly tannic. It's not overly drying, which I like. And it balances really well with the sweetness from that like candy corn or lipstick aftertaste I'm getting. Maybe that lipstick's like a cherry Jolly Rancher or something. I don't know. But I would rate it just a hair above average, like 0.6 probably. And that's just because it's not super viscous, but for what it is, being a blended whiskey, a blended bourbon whiskey, I really enjoy it. I like the sweetness, I like the balance of oak and rye spices, and that corn whiskey in there really gives it. You can really, I think that's what's helping with the sweetness, obviously. The finish is not very much. And I'm getting kind of like a little sour note and that oak again on the finish. You know, this, if you don't like a lot of oak in your whiskey, you might not like this. But I don't think it's overly oaked. Again, I think the sweetness balances with it pretty well. But the finish is below average for me. I'm gonna give it a 0.3. Presentation, again, below average. I mean, you know, I don't know how much thought really went into this. They just kind of slapped just a plain bottle, slapped a label on it. Nothing too fancy. Does have, is that synthetic? I think that's real, as a real cork. So yeah, I'd say below average on the presentation. I'll give it a 0.3 on that. Value, you can pick this up for $30, and I would say that that it's worth $30 if you know what you're getting. Sure, there's some bourbons that are better for less, but I think this falls into a unique category. I have found that this is my warm-up whiskey almost every night because it's so easy to drink, like 8 and Sand, smooth sailing. It is pretty smooth. I know a lot of you hate that, but it is. It goes down pretty easy. It starts to light your palate up to those flavors of oak and cinnamon and maybe cherry and corn. And so it does it in a light, delicate way where it's not going to fry out your palate. So I've been using this almost exclusively as a warm-up whiskey. If I'm going to drink whiskey tonight, my first glass is 8 and Sand because I enjoy the sweetness and the balance with the oak. Yeah, so availability, I think it's pretty available. I see it pretty regularly at Benny's. So I'm going to give it a 0.7 on that. So the total score on 8 and Sand is going to be a 2.8 out of 5. So it doesn't quite hit that bar worthy score, but I do think it's bar worthy. I would have this on your bar as an example of what a blended whiskey could be, as an example of a nice warm-up whiskey for the night for people. And also, I think it would be a great gateway whiskey if people are just getting into bourbon. This is one I would pull out, although the oak might be a little too much for some people, but for me, it's great. It's a really easy sipper and a great warm-up whiskey for the night. So yeah, 8 and Sand, we're going 2.8 out of 5. So it's like on the borderline of below average, but I think it's bar worthy. So I don't know if my score really captures it, but I guess a 2.5 would be an average whiskey. and this is just a hair above that, a hair below bar worthy, but I think it is bar worthy. I will probably always have one of these because I love it so much as a warm-up whiskey for the night. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this. Cheers, guys.